Everyone loves a good shonen story, right?
Yeah.
A dynamic, family-friendly adventure full of wonder and pure hype! But what makes a truly good shonen story? Is it fights and interesting power systems? Or is it story and world building? Well, if your shonen doesn't want to vanish like a fairy tale, pun intended, you might need to get your protagonist in order and make him an actually interesting character. Looking at you, Natsu! So let's analyze how Chainsaw Man, Demon Slayer and Mashle handle their respective main characters and find out what makes them stand out amongst the crowd of heroes, shinigamis and other types of hokages. In case you were living under a rock for the past century and clicked on this video not knowing what shonen means, let me explain. Shonen roughly translates as young man from Japanese and refers to an editorial category of all sorts of media targeting an audience of adolescent boys. Generally, most shonen stories are rich with action and follow a pretty simple but effective narrative formula. The unlikely protagonist has a fortuitous encounter with some funny stuff, becomes Superman and, after facing the big bad, swears revenge and goes to an adventure full of training montages, shoehorned beach episodes, and an obligatory thought arc that introduces the unnecessary new power system that will ruin the whole show. Yeah, sounds about right. Many tried to give this formula a fresh spin.
God love him, they tried.
But not many succeeded. And as it turns out, sometimes you just need to make a few tweaks to make things interesting. Just like Demon Slayer did with its approach to the good boy archetype. There are three general types of shonen protagonists: the good boy, the special boy, and the omnipotent god of destruction! Tanjiro is the prime example of a good boy, and probably one of the few that are believable and complex enough to be interesting. The main problem with this archetype is that good boys are often a little too good and naive for no reason whatsoever. They have a clear and noble goal to become Hokage, the strongest hero, the greatest mage king, and to achieve this goal they have to continuously face evil and experience misfortune. And, basically being a fairy tale for boys aged 12 to 45, they are rarely affected by this evil in any meaningful way, which doesn't really make sense in some cases. So there is a contradiction. But for Tanjiro, this behavior is mostly justified. First of all, he's a single-focused character, unlike many other shonen protagonists. Even if they are kind and just, there is always some sort of negative quality to them, like for example bad temper or perverseness. But Tanjiro is established as a kind and dependable older brother from the get-go, so there's no reason to doubt his character. Second, he has a simple and righteous purpose that prevents him from breaking even during the most trying times. It's Nezuko, his little sister, who became a demon. If not for her, he probably would have become as ruthless and bitter as some of the other demon hunters. But he still has Nezuko. He still has someone who needs him, who depends on him, and he cannot break down. He has to go forward to protect the last person who's dear to him. And although Tanjiro still goes through a lot of pretty dark shit, he braces for impact and endures. This is the resolve of a desperate older brother working hard to keep his little sister safe. And when you look at his character from that perspective, it becomes clear that he's not naive. He's not a goody two-shoes. He perfectly understands the reality of the world he's in, but he still has hope. And to preserve that hope and make it a reality, he will keep moving forward, no matter what. So, what can we learn from Tanjiro? First, that the good boy archetype can work and be interesting if you can properly establish the protagonist. His actions have to be consistent across the board, and his character has to be established early on. Second, the protagonist needs some sort of anchor to have a reasonable justification to not break down in the face of evil. The protagonist cannot succumb to darkness, but there has to be an understandable reason for his resolve. And as a result, you will establish a strong foundation for a character that will be able to drive the story forward and have enough depth to stay interesting, even if some of his or her qualities may not be so obvious at first glance. Denji, the protagonist of Chainsaw Man, is one of the most unique and intriguing characters to come out of the shonen genre in recent years. He is the embodiment of the special boy archetype, but with a twist. First off, let's talk about his appearance. Denji has a chainsaw for a head. Yes, you heard that right. A chainsaw for a head. It's not exactly the kind of power you'd expect from a shonen protagonist, but it's one that works surprisingly well, even when compared to other horror-adjacent shows like Jujutsu Kaisen. But it's not just his appearance that sets him apart. Denji's backstory is probably one of the most tragic and heart-wrenching in recent shonen history. He's a character who has been through the ringer and has come out on the other side with a unique perspective on life. He's a survivor, but he's also a bit of a goofball. Despite his rough exterior and his tendency to eat things he shouldn't, Denji has a heart of gold. He also has that dog in him, which is both a figure of speech and not a figure of speech. Just like other special boys, Denji doesn't really need to work hard to obtain his powers. He just gets his from a deal with the devil. It also gives him a bit of an edge, but this balances out by his goofiness, which is always nice to see in a protagonist. But the thing that truly differentiates Denji from the other special boys and makes him truly special is how he handles things. He has this aura of impenetrable stupidity, but also wit. He's weird, but he's also extremely badass. Denji is a walking contradiction done right, and it makes him very human. He is special, but he is also very believable and just literally me for real for real. You believe his every action. Somehow Fujimoto-sensei made potentially the most unlikable character very believable and relatable. He's so extreme with his flaws and quirks, together with his positive outlook on life, that you just can't help but feel that he's real. He's human. Denji is a character that you can't help but root for. I mean, when I was 14, boobs were also my only motivation in everything I did. And who hasn't had a bad day and wanted to just go on a chainsaw rampage? Okay, maybe not exactly like Denji, but you get the point. Overall, Denji shows that the protagonist doesn't have to be a perfect hero to be interesting. In fact, flaws and imperfections can make them even more relatable to the audience, if done right. And whether he's a magical boy with a chainsaw for a head doesn't have anything to do with it. Okay, maybe just a little bit. Okay, so we've talked about the good boys and the special boys, but there is a third type of shonen protagonist. The omnipotent god of destruction! This archetype is typically overpowered from the start and is unbeatable in combat. However, Mash from Mashle tinkers with this archetype just a bit to create a unique and interesting character. Mash is a character with immense physical strength, but don't worry, he also has a heart of gold. He uses his strength not to dominate others, but to protect those around him. Despite being incredibly powerful, he is also incredibly humble, often downplaying his own abilities. And yeah, that's something that can be said about any other character like him, Saitama being the prime example. However, the setting of Mashle being a fantasy series brings a whole new dynamic to Mash's character. This is basically Harry Potter, but in anime, with anime logic. And so, in a world where magic is everything, he was born without any magic powers of his own. That must have been a real disappointment for his parents, because the first thing they did was to abandon the child. Just like, nope, not dealing with a muggle, thank you very much. We'll be on our way now. Bye-bye! However, despite the shitty hand given to him, which is the norm for shonen protagonists for some reason, he was determined to become the strongest person in the world and worked tirelessly to develop his physical strength. And this makes Mash the underdog of this story, despite his incredible physique. He needs to come up with creative solutions and use his incredible physique very cleverly. Not only that, he needs to hide the fact that he has no magic so that he would not be persecuted by the authorities. And this, in my opinion, is a very clever utilization of an overpowered protagonist who still needs to overcome many obstacles. The world itself is against him, and he needs to abide by its rules while also being unable to abide by them. And that's not the only thing that sets Mashle apart. Most of the time, he's the centerpiece of the action, and although the obstacles in front of him are often nothing compared to him, he still feels grounded and real. He still needs to work hard on his form not to lose mass, he's being somewhat sociable without being edgy at all, but most importantly, he gives enough room for the other members of the cast to show off, but doesn't lack presence himself. Overall, Mashle really isn't that special. There's nothing groundbreaking about his character, but he lacks all the annoying parts of all the other overpowered protagonists, while min-maxing his workout routine and being more than just a function in the story. And most importantly, he's grounded and believable enough to stand out from the crowd of other similarly overpowered AGMCs that you see all the time. In conclusion, writing an interesting shonen protagonist is like walking on a rope over a chasm. It's a constant balancing act of fantasy and believability. Quirky and edgy doesn't mean interesting or deep, it's lazy. Dead dads and special circumstances also don't add much to the story, and demon lords are no more than a boring function. But if you let the story and environment play a big enough role and make the character's action clash with the world in a meaningful way, you will establish a strong foundation for not only the protagonist, but the story as a whole.